Mother's Day is around the corner, and for some women, this is not a holiday that you look forward to due to the unhealthy relationship that you have with your mother. Trust me, I get it. I suffered silently for years because as a child growing up, my mother was emotionally unavailable, and that pain followed me all the way to my adulthood. And this is one of the very reasons that I had to create the Motherless Child Guidebook, a sacred space for healing your mother wounds, to really support myself and my healing journey and be a resource for women all over the world so that they too could start to heal. Inside of the digital guidebook, you're going to find topics that's going to cover how to identify the toxic patterns in the relationship that you have with your mother, how to identify your mother wounds and heal from your past, what does it look like to reparent your inner child, and then lastly, how do you create a new narrative, a new story for yourself that feels good when you share it with others. Now, also within the guidebook, you're going to have soul writing prompts. So that way you can get your feelings out of your heart and out of your mind and down on paper. You're also going to have 5 videos that are going to complement each section. And it's going to be like I'm holding your hand and giving you a warm hug after you complete each section. I mean, what's better than having a friend go along with you, right? And then you're also going to get additional resources such as a playlist of music to help you and encourage you, healing, affirmations, a book list, and so much more. Go to themotherlesschild.com and invest in your healing today. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Girl Be Free podcast. I'm your host, Siobhan, where I'm going to inspire and motivate you to show up for yourself. We are in the Motherless Child Guidebook, a sacred space for healing your mother wounds, 3-part series. And today is part 3, which is titled, I Am Breaking Generational Trauma. I remember when I was in therapy several years ago when we were having our one-on-one session, and my therapist said, you know you're breaking generational curses, right? And I said, tell me more. What do you mean? And she said, when you look at every area of your life, like the trauma stops with you. And I took that all in and I was like, you know what? She's so right. Like I am breaking generational trauma that has been passed down over and over again. And I felt so good in that moment. And I was intentional, about continuously doing the inner work that I talk about on the podcast all the time. And then most recently, after I completed the Motherless Child Guidebook, I was having a conversation with my cousin. And she had come over my house and we were just chit-chatting. And I was telling her how excited I was that the Motherless Child Guidebook was now complete. I had sent it over to my graphic designer and how I just felt like so good. And she starts to share with me, she said, you're breaking generational curses. She said, the trauma that you experienced, it stops with you. And she said, the most powerful thing about this is that you are now teaching other women the same thing and how to change the trajectory of their life. So that means their life will be different and everyone connected to them will be different as well. And I took it in again. I said, you're so right. And I didn't look at the Motherless Child Guidebook in the beginning. I didn't look at it that way. I just knew I needed to create something that I wish I had that could support me on my journey of healing from my mother wounds. And when she made that point, it reminded me of what my therapist said. And that is exactly what this piece of work is. We are breaking generational trauma. And if you're not familiar with that phrase, basically that's just trauma passed down generation from generation. And it's not consciously in most cases, it is a subconscious thing that happens. And if you don't do something about it, you will pass on that same trauma to your children, and that cycle will just continue on. And so after I had that conversation with my cousin, the following day I went for a walk outside, and I was just taking in the beauty of the summer. The sun was shining, all that jazz. And as I was walking, I said, you know what? I got to share that conversation that I had with my cousin. I need to share that on Facebook. And as I was typing it, and I was wrapping up to say, I am teaching other women how to break generational curses, it starts to rain out of nowhere, like a sprinkle of rain. And I look up and the sun is just shining so bright, but it's raining. And I knew in that moment that God was affirming what I felt inside. that he was cleansing me of the trauma and the pain, and that he was proud of the work that I was doing, and that I was obedient to this call that's not very easy, y'all. This is emotional work, but I was obedient to it. And I just looked up and I smiled and I'm like, I receive all of that. And by the time I got home, maybe a few minutes later, the rain had stopped. That was God speaking directly to me, and I felt it in that very moment. And I am absolutely sure that the work that I'm doing, not only will it change my life, but it's going to change every single woman or man who invests in the Motherless Child Guidebook. And if your healing journey is as important to you as it is to me, you're going to do whatever it takes to get started. Now let's talk about generational trauma a little bit more here. So, because I really want you to envision this in your mind. So let's just say when your grandmother had your mother, it's very possible that she could have been carrying her own trauma, maybe a toxic relationship from her mother. Something was going on in her life that was passed down to her through her mother. And then your grandmother gets pregnant with your mom, and that same trauma, if no one decides to heal from it, is passed over to the next person. And so whatever you experience with your mother, and I talk about this in the Motherless Child Guidebook, I don't believe, in my heart of hearts, I don't think that your mother intentionally wanted to hurt you. I don't think that your mother intentionally wanted you to suffer. However, she was acting out possibly of what was passed down to her through generations and generations. And so if something was missing in her life, if she experienced some traumatic experiences, guess who got that? You did. And you have to set in your mind, in your heart, that the trauma stops with you, that you're going to do whatever it takes to heal, so that way your children and your children's children are not living through your trauma. And I remember several months ago, I posted this on Facebook. I said, as a result of me going to therapy, my children get to benefit from my healing. My children are not going to experience the trauma that I went through because I've been doing the inner work with going to therapy and working with the life coach and journaling and reading the books and, being self-aware and using my stones and burning sage and all these different spiritual practices that I'm doing to make myself whole. And that means that they don't have to go through the same pain and hurt that I experienced. Now, will they have pain? Absolutely. Will they go through stuff in life? Absolutely. But I'm not passing down my pain. Not at all. I won't do that. And so I hope that you have the same intention in mind, that the trauma that you've experienced, that it stops with you, that you are going to make a commitment to yourself, that you will do the work that it takes to heal. The Motherless Child Guidebook is an investment into yourself, right? It is less than a session at therapy, but it's definitely an investment in yourself. And it's going to be the starting point of what it takes to identify the toxic relationships that you have with your parents, or specifically with your mother. Okay, it's going to teach you how to mother your inner child. How do you heal those wounds that you have from your mother that has been passed down? And then how do you begin to change your narrative? So then that way, the things that have happened in your past, you're not living through it. You're creating a new story for yourself. All of that is possible. And I know that because I am a witness. I am a living example of it. Okay, I have identified the toxic relationship that I have with my mother. And in my case, my mother was emotionally and mentally unavailable. I have started to do the work with mothering my inner child. I have identified what my mother wounds are, and I've changed my narrative. I'm changing my story because now I'm in a place where I am not carrying the abandonment issues that I have from my childhood, but I'm creating a new story for myself so that way I'm not revisiting my pain over and over again, and then I can help women just like you start to do the work. So I was reading this post on Instagram, and it's from the page The Holistic Psychologist. And she says, childhood trauma also can look like, number one, not being seen or heard. Number 2, having a parent who unconsciously molds or shapes you from a place of their own unhealed trauma. Number 3, having a parent who lives through their child vicariously. Number 4, being told that certain emotions make you weak or undesirable. Number 5, a lack of boundaries. Number 6, having a parent who focuses on overcompensating for things that they were lacking in their own childhood. Number 7, having a parent who denies your reality. And that is a big one that I have heard from so many women about how their mothers dismiss everything that has happened in their childhood because they don't want to own up to their stuff. Number 8, having a parent who focuses heavily on appearance, whether that's body, hair, clothing, and makeup. Number 9, being an emotional support for parents. And then number 10, having a parent who cannot regulate their own emotions. So that's also what childhood trauma looks like. So it's more than just traumatic experience that may have happened. It can also look like what I just shared with you. And so it is your responsibility. In order to flourish, in order to be free, you have to break the generational trauma. It is not an overnight change. It takes time. I've been doing this work for several years, and I'm so glad that I got started. Because if I never would have started doing the healing work, like what I talk about in the Motherless Child Guidebook, I would not be talking to you today. I would not be doing the work that I'm doing today. My life will look completely different. And so I encourage you, as I wrap up this 3-part series, to invest in the Motherless Child Guidebook, a sacred space for healing your mother wounds. Not only will I cover the topics of, toxic mother patterns, how to identify your mother wounds, mothering your inner child, creating a new narrative, as well as sharing my story and why I created the guide, you're also going to get jam-packed bonuses that's going to help support you on your journey. And that includes over 90 minutes of video content that complements the 40-page guidebook. You're going to have 25 soul writing prompts that you can journal that will help you dig deep and write from your heart. Over 30 healing affirmations that will be in the guidebook, but you can also download the MP3 so that you can listen to the affirmations anywhere you go. A curated book list, so that way you have books and resources that you can further look into to help you support your journey from healing from your mother wounds. A music playlist with songs that encourage me that I want to share with you. And then lastly, you're going to get the Motherless Child Guidebook podcast series. All of that for an investment of $50 for the Motherless Child Guidebook, a sacred space for healing your mother wounds. I encourage you to order your copy today at themotherlesschild.co. And even if you have a beautiful relationship with your mother and you've grown a lot, there's somebody in your life that can benefit from this work. Trust me, I know it. People have been privately sharing their painful stories, and you would never know that they're suffering or suppressing that pain if you just looked at them. You never know what your friends or your family are going through or who's following you on social media. So I encourage you to share this podcast series, share the link for the Motherless Child Guidebook, with your audience and with your community, because you never know who needs to do the healing work if that person is not yourself. And even if it is you, you invest in it, maybe you invest in it for a friend and you support them. You can do that as well. So you can purchase the Motherless Child Guidebook, A Sacred Space for Healing Your Mother Wounds, and you can purchase it for a friend that you want to support and help on their journey. Again, the website is themotherlesschild.co. I hope you enjoyed this 3-part series, and please make sure you connect with me on Instagram at Be Free Project. If you want to shoot me an email, feel free to do that. I will love to know your key takeaways from the episode. You can share all of my podcasts in your stories, on your feed, on social media. Just tag me at Be Free Project so I can see it and say, hey girl, hey. Thank you so much for believing in me and the work that I'm doing and supporting it in any capacity. I deeply appreciate you. And until next time, girl, be free.